So social media is a funny one because you need to be present on it for your audience, for your sponsors. You need to be transparent on it. But then there's also a line where you don't want to cross, where you end up putting more pressure on yourself because you're being too transparent on it. How do you draw that line?
Yeah, it's a really challenging one, and definitely something that I've had to negotiate. And I've definitely overshared and undershared. You want to bring people along with the journey, and you want to show the highs and lows. But at the same time, you need to protect your energy, and you need to protect expectations. And a lot of the time, I feel like what I think or I perceive people's expectations is merely my internal expectations and me just trying to make sense of it all. And so for me, it was kind of like defining what success looks like in these races for me, and understanding that what I think is success may not be what my audience or what someone else deems successful for me. Like an example is doing the UTMB 100 miles last year. And, I came 10th place, and I was absolutely so stoked. And a few people were just kind of like, oh, oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't it wasn't first. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like for me, it was that course scared me so much. And so many years I've wanted to do it, but I haven't felt that I was strong enough to kind of endure that. And there's so many parts of that race that scare me: the whole night, the whole day, the 10,000 meters of climbing. And so success for me looked like navigating those hurdles as they came, getting to that finish line. And, I was so content with that I was so fine with people being like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, oh, don't be, I'm so happy. And it was just, I got everything I wanted out of that experience. And I try and share that on social media to kind of show people that success isn't always first step of the podium. It can be meaning that you learn or you navigate challenges that you had fear about, and then you were able to overcome and realize that you kind of didn't even you endured more than you thought you ever could.
Yeah, for sure. And then you mentioned there running through the night. What is the experience of that? Because it does sound quite terrifying.
It's so funny because when I think of running through the night, it like I like get a little bit of anxiety about it. But when I'm in it and I'm doing it, it's probably the most beautiful time of running and some of my favorite memories. When you're running in the night, you have your head torch on, and all that you can see is your little spotlight in front of you. And the mountains disappear, the landscape, the people around you. All you have is that little step of light, and that's where you're going to put your right foot and then your left foot. And it really just simplifies your life, for hours and hours and hours. All you're doing is focusing on that little bit of light. And I think sometimes in the daytime, we can get so distracted and worried about the big mountains in front of us, the people on the sidelines looking at us, and we forget that all we need to do is focus on is that next step, just making that next step count, and they'll all add up and they'll move us forward. So I think it's such a beautiful time to run. But in saying that, I would avoid it if I could, because it's beautiful, but it is, there is like, if you can see that darkness as like not to worry about, rather than focusing on worrying about that darkness and what could be there, that's when you find the peace. But you've just got to relax and sink into that little bubble of light that you've been given.
I love how you've turned that into a metaphor. That's really beautiful. You're like, just focus on the steps. That's so nice. Suddenly you get this like poetic answer to this question. Oh gosh. So you race distances from 20 kilometers to then 170 kilometers, 100 miles. How do you train for that variety of distance?
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting one, because I think people would assume I run more than I do. Just because I race 170 kilometers doesn't mean that I run equivalents of that, or even half of that, or even a third of that regularly. It's still a massive toll on the body, whether you're an elite or whether you're an everyday. Running 10Ks, 20K, 30K, it affects the body and it breaks you down, and it can build you up if you give it the rest, love, food, and everything that it needs. But, I train just consistently. I've been doing it for 10 years, showing up, going out, running from 30 minutes up to, 6 hours I'll go for runs for. But yeah, it's kind of just the longer you go in distance, the more it just becomes about mindset. You can kind of run recklessly and grunt your way through 20Ks. But when you get up to that kind of 50K, 100K, 100 miles, you've really got to sink into like, I'm going to be in this like discomfort for a day, a night, another day. And it's kind of like, can I work on all the other aspects like nutrition and looking after my feet and my gear and staying warm and all these other things? Am I able to manage all of that and stay present enough to help my future self as the hours go past? And that's kind of probably where I see my strength is in I feel like one of my best traits in running is that I don't worry about what I can't control, and I always know that I have control of my effort and my attitude. And those are the two things that I'm always like, the longer this goes, the more opportunity I have to work on both of those things. Like the effort I put into looking after myself and the attitude at which I choose to move forward. Is it with curiosity or is it with detriment and anxiety? And it's kind of being able to work on that that's gotten me to where I am today.